What is happening, everyone? Welcome back to the Copy Podcast and Pod and a Pint, episode 25. We are back in Shenanigans once again. I'm Mick Moran, joined by Paul Gorst this time. Do a little cheers, lads.
Cheers, Mick.
How's it going, lads?
All good, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yes,
Busy?
very busy. Surprisingly busy for June. I was a bit gutted because I wanted to take some time off in June and I just forgot. And then June's rota went up and I realised I'm working right the way through June. So I was thinking it was going to be a bit of a slow burner, but it's been busy, hasn't it? You know, Liverpool getting the ducks in a row early, so that at least gives us stuff to talk about, stuff to work on, and Liverpool looking like they are serious. Serious as champions, but seriously in the market this summer.
Yeah, I was saying to you before we started recording about like getting annoyed about a transfer you know is going to go through. Getting annoyed that it's taking long is like, what a privileged position.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on that table now where like City, I'm sure City were in for Vert, and I know they were in for Kerkez as well, and we've kind of, I still of the opinion that they were their first choices as well. I reckon they've had to settle for second best, because Liverpool have chose the top two dogs in those positions. They've had to go and get Cherky and Aït-Nouri, who's both no slouches, by the way, both really good players. But it's a weird contrast, isn't it? Because like, it's not so long ago Liverpool were in fishing in markets where you're like, oh, we might get him, but we might not get him. We might have to go a bit lower than him because like aspirations, and like they might see Liverpool as like a project where they can leap to and then leap somewhere else.
A stepping stone. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Liverpool have, you look at who they brought in. Frimpong was a little bit of a different one, because I think in an ideal world Liverpool would have kept Trent. They tried to make him one of the best paid fullbacks in the world, and there's hard sets of Real Madrid, and everyone's got their own opinions on that, but they sort of pivoted quite quickly, didn't they? And brought in Frimpong, triggered the release clause, and I think Liverpool always like release clauses when they're in play. It means that you don't have to negotiate for weeks on end like they did with Florian Wirtz, and I think a lot of people got a little bit frustrated over how that was, dragging on in quote unquote. But from start to finish, it was only really 3 weeks, which for a deal of its size was no time at all, really, when you think of some transfer sagas to drag on and run on and on and on. So Liverpool have been very proactive and aggressive, and looking really exciting, aren't they, because I think as champions you're heading into the summer and you're expecting some sort of statement, not necessarily a statement for the sake of it, but I think knowing the way Liverpool operate, anyone who they spend big on, that they're convinced that this is going to be a top player or already is a top player. So when they get the Bundesliga Player of the Year, I think supporters have got every right to be massively enthused and excited, and Milos Kerkez will be next to the door, won't he, if he's not already. And so what is it, 4 transfers now in the space of a month if you include Mamardashvili, and it's going to be a record breaking summer of spend, which is what a lot of people have been asking for a number of years. Well,
that's it, that's what I mean. It feels a bit strange, because there's then talk of Isak, and like Liverpool, like there's pieces coming out going, oh, Newcastle can't offer him this amount, but Liverpool can. You're like, fucking hell. What I mean? It's like nice to be at like the big dog table, as it were. And we are going to move a little bit away here to an opening question. So sorry, because we are going to get back to Liverpool. Don't worry. I always do this question, and we're trying to make it under a minute. This one.
Go on.
So you've got 4 fingers and a thumb. Liquids dispensing from them. What are you picking? This is so can I just sort of be like, I'll top up my Guinness with my thumb. You can just smash it in there and do it.
Hey, I'll go a bit practical then with my index, and I'll do a bit of unleaded, stick it in my card and save myself a fortune. Maybe orange Lucozade for the hangovers. If I've gone too heavy with the thumb, I'll have to go to the middle.
Normal or sport? I had this question.
Normal.
Yeah.
That'll cure me hangover when I've gone a bit too heavy with my thumb on my Guinness. Maybe for a bit of variety, the ring finger could be like a beer, if it's not going to be...
What beer would you go for?
Do you know what? Actually, I wouldn't. I'd do I'd do ring finger for maybe a Captain Morgan spice rum.
Ooh.
So
okay.
I could sort of differentiate there.
Yeah.
And then I don't know with this one.
Would you have a Coke though, so you can just like...
I guess that'd be me. That could be me little 1-2, couldn't it? Yeah, I'll go with that. So Guinness, petrol, orange Lucozade, Captain Morgan's, and I did say Captain Morgan's, didn't I?
Yeah.
Just any spice rum. I'm not picky really. And then Coke. Yeah, there you go.
there you go. Let me know. Let us know yours. But like,
Pity can't do it now, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is absolutely beautiful as always from Shenanigans. I just like That's Not One because it's always different. Like people like go, oh yeah, I've got to go practical. I've got to go water. I've got to go like like.
I mean,
survival.
I suppose water does make sense for the survival of your being, but
I mean, it comes with stipulations though. It's like, is it this? Then I've got no access to running tap water. If I've got this plus tap water, then you're wasting a finger having
that is
water,
true,
aren't you? Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you drink tap water, I know there's some people out there who say all kinds of stuff about tap water, which we won't get into. But the real question is, and this is from Chippy, and he's asked us to discuss favourite rap or hip hop song. And my initial thoughts that was, how long have you got?
Yeah,
this could
I'm doing a tripod on that. Yeah,
I know. Like I think I've spoke to you a few times over Twitter about like me. I've posted a few times like saying 20 years since X album. I know you always get involved in that type of stuff. But getting it down and like crystallising it to one song is, I think, really difficult. I think it's going to be like a top 5 type job.
Yeah, it'd have to be. Yeah, I mean, the first one that came to my mind was sort of Anything Off the Blueprint.
Yeah.
Jay-Z album, obviously. Maybe You Don't Know. Just Blaze produced it. Unbelievable song. I love the remix as well, but it's not quite in the brackets of the original. Girls, Girls, Girls is a massive tune on that as well. Just anything Blueprint era. Shook Ones by Mobb Deep come to mind as well.
I've got that written down.
There's loads that, wasn't there? Like I say, you could be here all day.
You could, yeah. It's difficult, I know.
Yeah. Anything off College Dropout? You know, we know Kanye West has gone a little bit sort of out of bounds over the last few years.
That's when he was like fresh and he was like trying to put himself out there as like
first album, Jesus Walks.
Unreal.
Yeah.
2001 as well by Dre.
Yeah. I mean, there's loads, isn't there? First 3 M&L albums are all unbelievable. Actually, we can make an inside pod. Maybe this could be the next spin-off.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a few dead quick, like The Watcher by Dr. Dre, Nothing But a G Thing, California Love. I wrote Shook Ones by Mobb Deep, Juicy, B.I.G., It Was a Good Day, Ice Cube, Dear Mama, Tupac, which I always liked that song, but like since my mum died, that took on like a new meaning as well, without getting too depressing. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But like takes on like a new life in itself. And then like you said, Eminem, Slim Shady LP. But like I'm a big fan of Outkast and like Ludacris, and I think the fact that Eminem has always said that Andre 3000 from Outkast is like an inspiration for him. Yeah. I think that speaks volumes as well. Like because Outkast, like maybe because they made like songs like Hey Ya and all that, which are a bit like poppy.
Yeah. Well, I always remember. I think Andre 3000. I think he was at Glastonbury, and I think it was when Stankonia was out, which was around about 2001, and he said something like, "Hands up if you've been with us from our first album." And everyone started like cheering, and he said, "That's not our first album," you know. And he's going back to like 1994 or whenever the first album come out. He's a legend, and his latest album is just all flutes. Yeah. Weirdly, I've never listened to it, but no words, no rapping, it's just all flutes.
It's just I don't know, it's just gone on a weird like side little side hustle, doing like a separate thing, which is a bit mad, and fair play to him like for trying it. All right, well, let us know your favourite hip hop song of all time.
Think of any more. We'll come back to that. It's a good question.
There's just too many, isn't there? Like Ludacris, and like I just love Ludacris's tone. Like it's just like was like, especially like what I was mentioning, like all them songs really are 90s. So I was born in '89. So like I was way too young to be listening to any of them at the time. Yeah. But especially when the Eminem comes along, even at the time you knew that was even at like 10 or 11, you probably knew that was a big thing in the era of like hip hop and rap for him to come along.
That's how I got into it. People listening to the Marshall Mathers LP in school.
Yeah, unreal.
That was his second album, and what's this? Started listening to that. Go back to his first album. Yeah. Get into Dr. Dre. Get into Snoop and Exhibit and all of them, and then Tupac and Nas. Yeah. Didn't even mention Nas then, did we?
Nas,
Jay-Z, and then just sort of spiraled from there. And I've been listening to hip hop for longer than I'd care to mention. I know, 30 years.
It's one of them, innit? Like, because I've got like an older cousin, and I think he's like 3 years older than me, Frankie, and he was always the one like kind of like took me under his wing. Yeah. So I'd be listening to what he listened to, and it was like, like the Up and Smoke tour, all the big fellas on, and I was like, oh my god, this is fucking unreal. All right, well, we might come back to that at the end if we've got any more additions, but let's talk about the Reds, because that's what we're here for. And Kerkez, when this video comes out, it's currently 20-5, so it might be done by now. It probably will be done by now by the time this video goes out.
I think it's fair to say he has signed. He was just waiting on the
official announcement, aren't we? What are your thoughts on him then? Because Robbo's been such a servant. Kerkez is 10 years younger, and he's got that engine, and he can run that whole left-hand side basically on his own, I'd say. And I just think in terms of Liverpool, just identifying the fella that they need and going in and getting him. We've had some issues in the past with the likes of Van Dijk, where we've had to apologise to Southampton and all that, but we've always, it's the gist of it is you always want the main fella, and you're not going to variate from that. You always want that main fella, and I think Kerkez is one of them where 21, the ceiling and the improvement that he can go through in the next couple of years is unreal, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, like you say, I think he was Liverpool's first choice. He's aggressive. He's like an old, he's like Andy Robertson, like a young Andy Robertson essentially, isn't he? Motors up and down the wing, like you say. Really good left foot. He's aggressive. He's front-footed. He doesn't mind getting tight. He likes a little bit of aggro as well, which you don't mind. And he looks like he's got, all the tools needed to be a top-class left-back, really. The thing that excites me about it is Richard Hughes knows all about him. He was the one who signed him from AZ Alkmaar, and was it 2 years ago when he was 19, brought him to the Premier League. He's become a Premier League player over the last 2 years, hasn't he? And last season in particular, with that sort of breakout Bournemouth team with so many stars, and sadly it looks like it's going to be pillaged really this summer. And Liverpool are part of the vultures who are circling really. But yeah, it's new ground for Liverpool, spending that much on a left back, but I think these days it's sort of par for the course for a top Premier League player, 40 million and above. So yeah, he's going to come in 21, 10 years younger than Robertson, like you say, and I'm sure we're going to get onto Robertson's future, but I'd like to see a world where these just sort of dovetail for the next season. It can be difficult at the sharp end of the Premier League, which Kerkez isn't used to, whereas Robertson has had 8 years experience of playing for Liverpool, knowing the demands day in, day out, every single game, every single minute. And there might be some times where Kerkez is struggling a little bit, and that's where Robertson comes in and his experience plays a part. So I'd like to see a world where these sort of develop as the season goes on, and then eventually Kerkez becomes the first choice. And then whatever happens with Robertson will happen, and if he leaves at the end of next season and he gets the massive send-off that he's deserved, that's how I'd like to see it play out. Robertson himself might have other ideas, which I'm sure we're going to come on to, and I was slightly surprised when I heard of Atletico Madrid's interest recently, but it looks like the ball's in his course at the moment.
Yeah, I mentioned to Craig, I think it was on the last pod, about maybe looking at it in levels. I was thinking maybe Kerkez, although he's fresh on the scene and whatever, but obviously if we've targeted him as the number one, so he's going to be the number one in essence, and he's level one. Then you've got Robbo, who was level one for so long and has maybe dropped into a level 2 category, you'd say. Then you'd say Tsimikas is probably a level 3. If you get rid of Robbo, the drop from a Kerkez to a Tsimikas is 2 levels rather than keeping Robbo around, and it's just a 1 level drop. And Robbo's got the experience, loads of experience, where there's games where you go away to United, just put Robbo in, just for security, and we know what he can. He knows that environment, that experience, and he can handle it a bit better maybe than a Kerkez in that initial season. Yeah,
that's fair. And like I say, it's a steep learning curve at Liverpool, isn't it? You've only got to take a poor touch, and not necessarily the crowd get on your back, but it's just magnified a lot more than it would be at Bournemouth, where if Bournemouth concede the goal, there's not any massive sort of recriminations. Broadly, it's sure the Bournemouth supporters will pick the bones out of it, but essentially it's what happens. But at Liverpool, if there is a defensive mix-up, if there is a mishap, Jarell Quansah has probably experienced that more than anyone this season, hasn't he? Not necessarily been through a huge fault of his own, but he's been at the scene of a lot of crimes, whether that's fair or unfair, and that potentially could happen with Kerkez. So I'd love to see Robertson stay and just sort of ease along that process. Kerkez is a young player, and you could still sort of sell Tsimikas for maybe a quarter of the fee that you're going to pay for Kerkez, which massively offsets it. So that's what I'd like to see, but I think Robertson might have other ideas, which I'm sure we will find out about in the coming days and weeks, really. So
Yeah.
I'm not being rude, I just have to sort of keep checking the phone just in case there are any further updates on Kerkez.
No worries at all. Yeah, I didn't know anything about. I wasn't aware really of the Robbo to Let's Go stuff until I was mentioning to you before about the pod with Dave Lynch, and we were sat upstairs in the weird kitchen and like fire alarm weird portrait area. And he kind of mentioned it to me, and that was the first I heard of it. And then obviously like the week after, that's kind of when it progressed, like, oh, Robbo might be interested in this, and like obviously knows Kerkez is coming into play 90% of the games and he's not going to be happy with that, etc, etc. So I mean, it remains to be seen what's going to happen with that, but I think it would be interesting. But keeping Robbo around would be, I'm sure if we're saying that slot's switched on enough to go, he probably thinks that as well. Like, he wants to keep experience and quality around. Yeah, I mean,
I was at a charity event in April where Robertson was like the big star who was up for the Q&A type of thing, and it was with Carrigan, and he basically said he'd love to stay on and sign a new contract, and he felt that as you know, he wasn't anywhere near as much of a fading force as some people would have you believe, and he still felt he had a lot to give, and he is only 31, so I could understand where he was coming from. He has played a lot of football, he's played over 600 professional games, which is a lot of wear and tear on the body, isn't it? Particularly a player as explosive as Robertson, getting up and down the flank over the years, you know, particularly during the Jurgen Klopp time as well, which was, you know, especially intensive style of football, wasn't it? So I could sort of see where Robertson was coming from. Maybe there's been a conversation, I'm just speculating here, maybe there's been a conversation where he's spoke to Slot and it's been a little bit Jordan Henderson-esque, where he's been told that they'd love him to stay around, but he might not be playing anywhere near as much as he'd hope to and he'd like. And I think when you've been an elite player for so long, that's probably something you don't want to hear for your ego, and these players do have egos. So it's going to be interesting what happens. You know, I'd love him to stay, and I think now is the right time for Tsimikas to move on and you know, wish him well, and he maybe goes to a club further down the Premier League where he's playing every week. But you know, I think a lot will depend on what Robertson wants.
Yeah, I think what people are taking from it as well is maybe being a bit more cutthroat as well, because like under the Klopp era, I think maybe some of the criticisms like online where he's being too loyal to players that have passed the sell-by date, like they need to have been moved on a year or two ago. He's kept them on because he's got good relationships with them and stuff like that, where maybe now where we've got the data nerds like the Edwardses and the Hugheses, you know what I mean, like that type of stuff, and Slot who is as honest as you can be. Like if you're playing shit, he'll tell you that, do you know what I mean? Like, he's going to tell you right down the line what's happening and what he thinks, and then you've got to make a decision off the back of that. But I think that's good though, in terms of it is a business at the end of the day, and Liverpool want to be winning league titles and Champions League titles, so you've got to be, there's no room for sentiment. I mean, I think there's always been a bit of that under Klopp, because we've seen it, but I think you've got to be ruthless, haven't you? If you want to go and win back-to-back Premier League titles, the first time since the 80s, you want to go and win Champions League titles, you've got to be ruthless, haven't you?
I think that's entirely fair, yeah. And I don't think Robertson had his best season last year at Liverpool, but I also think it was maybe exaggerated at times, a little bit overplayed. There was obviously the sending off at Fulham. I think he gets injured early on at Fulham, and it's just a bit of a catastrophic sort of 20 minutes for him, and he's at fault for the goal. Maybe he takes a poor touch, gets sent off, and that was sort of, people were starting to have a few concerns over whether he
started to get in his own head. I think it felt like watching him, I was like, he's starting to question about those like 50-50s where he'd normally, like early days, he'd shoot in and he'd nick it away and he'd be gone. He'd start to like go, can I make it? I'll try and make it, and miss it, and then he's exposed, and then stuff would happen off the back of that, which I think doesn't help when, like, mentally, if you're not aware of what your body can do. Like you said, he's played a lot of games, hasn't he? As well?
No, I think that's fair. But then, so that Fulham game of reference, I think it was in December time. But then he's man of the match against Girona in the Champions League. I think probably Alisson should have got that really, but you know, he was officially named man of the match, and you know, he's a player of the match, and he's just won the Premier League. You know, he's played. Tsimikas, there was a little bit of rotation early on, wasn't there, when Slot first came in, and he was sort of weighing up who his first choice left back was going to be, and eventually Robertson wins that battle, and then is the left back for the season, like he has been, you know, for the previous however many years under Klopp. And you can't overlook the fact that he's just played a vital role in a team that's won the Premier League. So he's not some sort of, busted flush by any means. Yeah. So I would like to see him stay on and just sort of, just do that handover to Kerkez as first choice as smoothly as possible. In a similar way, if you think back to when Robertson got on the team, Moreno was still first choice for quite a while, really, until he gets injured in, I think, the December time, and then Robertson comes in and never really looks back then for 8 years. But I do think there is a world where Liverpool can still have two, very good left-backs competing for that number one spot.
Yeah, especially if you think about it, like, if Robbo stays on, like, maybe another year, and then all of a sudden Kerkez is 22, it seems a little bit of an easier prospect after a year of, like, bedding in, and, like, he's obviously got the Premier League experience already anyway, but and you mentioned Quansah before. Let's talk about Quansah a little bit, because it looks like that he is going to be off to Leverkusen. This one's like, there was links initially with, I think it was Newcastle, wasn't it, for Quansah. But yeah, apparently he's going to be going to Leverkusen. 35 million. I think it's 30 up front and then 5 in add-ons. But only 22, and I think it's a massive statement that Liverpool someone who's, he didn't have a great season, but I think he had a decent enough season for someone of his age coming into a side where you need to be Van Dijk, because we're comparing everyone to Van Dijk. If you're not Van Dijk, you're getting judged on that, do you know what I mean? But to get like 30 plus mil for someone who's 22, and I think there's a buyback clause in there for 50 mil as well in a couple of years. I think it's savvy business again. Like I said, the nerds, the geniuses that are sorting all the stuff. I've got trust in them to sort that type of stuff out.
Yeah, I've seen a few people say that Leverkusen are overpaying for Quansah, but he's 22. He's on the fringes of the England squad. Nowadays that's not a massive amount. I've got a general rule of thumb, and it's not any sort of scientific thing, but if you're under 40 million, and if you're playing in the Premier League and you're under 40 million, you're probably not that good. And that's a bit of a sort of arbitrary way of judging it, but that's just like a rule of thumb I have. I think for Quansah, you look at where he came from in terms of, he broke into the first team under Klopp in that final season. We made that sort of leap, didn't he? That distance, and then this year he's sort of gone a little bit back. Not massively to where he was starting, but he's taken a little step back. If you viewed his progress, if his progress was in reverse, where he sort of made a decent step forward last season before last, and then last season he goes like that, you look and think, wow, what a player Liverpool have got here.
Point,
He ends the season under Klopp as first choice. He scores in his final game. He's partnering Van Dijk, and he starts the season as first choice, doesn't he? And then obviously loses too many duels, as Slot called it, with Liam Delap on the opening day, and then never really gets a look in for the rest of the season, which you can't really say was the wrong decision, because Konate and Van Dijk were spectacular. They go and win the league, win it comfortably. But I feel maybe has he been being discarded a little too soon, particularly with no replacement being immediately lined up. That's my concern on this. Is just, I was speaking to someone recently who was sort of explaining that they're going to target a younger centre back, a Lenny Yoro or a Dean Huijsen, who've both been targets for the last 2 summers. And they are relaxed if they can't find one, which to me is a little bit of a concern, because I think then you're going into the season with just the 3 centre backs, and the third one is Joe Gomez, who hasn't played since December. He might have ideas of his own to maybe push on and go and play somewhere else regularly.
And Konate's injury prone as well.
Konate's injury prone, there's his contract situation, so you're left, the only constant you're left with is Van Dijk, who, let's face it, is not a bad one to be left picking every week, but he's 34, and he could probably do with someone coming in, really, and that's only my only concern at the moment with Quansah, is they've been willing to let him go without having a sort of like for like coming in immediately. Mark A, being talk of him, they do like him, but I think reading between the lines is they like him to a point. His contract, they know his contract's up in 12 months, and unless Palace are going to bring down their asking price, I think Liverpool are prepared to keep the powders dry and wait. Real Madrid style, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well, because like Quansah, I think it's difficult because, like you said, Quansah's at a level now where, I like that you're not there. Like if he'd done like in stages the increments in the progression, you'd be looking at him in a completely different light. But because he did make that jump and perform so well, and then has made a bit of a drop back, maybe 10-15%, you're like, well, you can look at that as stagnation, or like maybe he's like it's too much for him, or like he had a good first season and then that's it. But he's dropped back down to his level, stuff like that. You can look at it like that, can't you? But no, but I think in terms of him, I think it's good for him individually because he gets the chance to go and play in the Bundesliga for Leverkusen, who are obviously a very good side, and he gets to play all the games, and we get an option to buy him back.
Yeah, there is the buyback. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You know, if he does establish himself as the player that Liverpool feel he's going to be, or certainly felt he was going to be a year ago, then that's buttons really in the scheme of things, isn't it? You know, people were just about to pay that for Dean Huijsen, or they were prepared to before Real Madrid stepped in. But it is interesting with Quansah. I remember speaking to someone in Klopp's last season, towards the end of that season, someone who's very close to him, and I said, do you consider Jarell to be a Liverpool first teamer now? And they said, oh no, he's got to play 50 games, he's got to play 100 games. And I was thinking, I don't know, you know, it seems like he's gone up that level now this season, that he will just be a Liverpool first teamer. And I didn't quite have the, I think you mentioned it there, the stagnation, didn't quite have that on the bingo card this season, given the season he was just coming off on.
Yeah.
But again, a little bit like Robertson, I think it's been a little bit overplayed at times as well.
Yeah, definitely.
He's been a little bit unfortunate with one or two things, you know, the own goal at West Ham in the Cup, He's always like this. I think you said it before. You mentioned the scene of the crime.
He's always there or in and around, so it's easy to go, oh, he's there.
Yeah.
What he's done something.
The one like leathers the ball at him from 2 yards out against Chelsea.
Well, that's not good. Is it?
It's almost like undersells him with the pass, he gives away the penalty. You know, just these little things that, you know, they sort of add up, don't they?
Yeah, and his teammates haven't helped him out in certain scenarios where he but it doesn't help his cause when it's like all you got to do, like especially like when you're on Twitter, like exhibit A, B, and C is like, oh yeah, there you go. Like there's a pattern there. There's a pattern, exactly. But no, fair play. Like he's gonna go there, and I hope he smashes it. But I think like you, I am a bit like skeptical about like going into the season like a bit light, because like you said, Van Dijk's not getting any younger. Unfortunately, I wish we could fucking brew a potion where he reverses backwards, like in that type of style. But let's talk about the season a little bit then before we finish up. Like the season ahead, like what are your thoughts then? Because obviously we've signed Wirtz, we've signed Frimpong, Kerkez might be done. it is done. But I think addressing, like obviously you mentioned Trent there, we're not going to get into Trent and stuff, but like addressing key areas, improving on what Robertson is and Kerkez, giving something different in terms of the passing element of what Trent can give, putting someone in there who's a speed demon who can get up and down the wing, play right wing as well, and then bringing in what I would say is one of, like people say this online all the time, but a generational talent in that 10 or like false 9 on the left position, whatever you want to put him. That so far is pretty good and exciting, isn't it?
Oh, unbelievably, yeah. I was so enthused when Liverpool were even being linked with Florian Wirtz, and you know there was talk that, I mean, the early talk was that, you know, he's a player we massively admire, obviously, but we feel that he's going to stay in Germany, either stay at Leverkusen or go to Bayern Munich. So Liverpool have pulled off a real coup to get him to the door with their charm offensive, and you know the idea of what slot sold to him has massively appealed, and this idea that Bayern just almost assumed they were going to get him is what's come back to bite them on the backside, really. So the idea of losing Trent, it was always a case of Liverpool need to get that creativity back in the team, and it's going to be fascinating into where it comes in, because there's no other right back who can do what Trent does. So how are they going to compensate for the shortfall of creativity? And as it turns out, it's just by the best number 10 in Europe, which is quite the response, isn't it? So I'm massively looking forward to seeing him play. You know, just even in pre-season, you know, Preston and you know the pre-season games on tour and stuff. And Frimpong and Kerkez, they're just going to add a new dynamic to the full-back areas, really. I think last season, I don't know whether you agree, but a lot of the talk was, well, what is an honest left full-back? Because we don't really know. You know, Trent was doing a lot more orthodox, traditional full-back stuff, you know, in a Trent style, obviously getting on the ball and still dictating play at times, but it felt like his creativity was negated a little bit by the role that he was being asked to play.
Yeah, definitely.
Now you've got Kerkez and Frimpong, just like say, speed demons who are going to stretch to play, open up space in the middle for the likes of Wirtz to go and wreak havoc. And you know, you've still got Mo Salah there, Luis Diaz, I hope he stays, Cody Gakpo, and then the one you want is just who's going to lead the line next season, isn't it? And I think that is where Liverpool are prepared to bide the time, wait and see what else opens up, because they've had a spectacular June, and now they've got the time and space to focus on outgoings, see what they can raise, and then maybe go and, knock on Newcastle's door. We'll see.
I don't know if we've got time for Isak. Have we got time for Isak or not? Yeah?
Yeah.
What obviously, I was going to say what are your thoughts on him, but I think he's just an absolute. I just love. Even like I used to do the pod with Christian, and Christian's Swedish, and like when he joined Newcastle, I was a big fan of him, and Christian was like typical. I was like, oh no, he's let's see how he gets on first. Like playing him down a little bit, and I was like, nah, he's going to be. I just got a feeling he's going to be.
Well, his La Liga Young Player of the Year, wasn't he, when he joined?
Just quick, strong, like a big fella. Was he 6'4"? Can lead the line, score goals. He was just, I mean, the level he's hit in the Premier League, I think obviously I couldn't predict because no one knew, but I think it's not surprised me how good he's been, and I think the stuff that's came out lately, like in terms of like I think it was like on the Times, and it was like Liverpool can offer a bit more than Newcastle can, and I think someone, I can't remember who it was, but like I didn't think any of this Isak thing until that article, and because there's like little signs in there, like maybe PR tells about like maybe Liverpool might revisit that at some point, or maybe try and force the issue at some point. But I think it looks like from what you hear that he's going to be like the guy Liverpool wants up there.
Yeah, I think Liverpool would love to bring him in. Why wouldn't you, after the season he's just had? I think probably the best way of looking at it is, he's going to cost over 100 million again, isn't he? And I was initially reluctant to think that Liverpool would do that twice in one summer, having never done it in an entire history. But I think what was communicated to me anyway, particularly around the Wirtz deal, is it's not necessarily a deviation from the way the club has been run forever, really, under FSG, 15 years. It's more the fact that they haven't spent anything over the last 4 transfer windows.
Yeah.
Ryan Gravenberch was basically the last player they bought until Chiesa. Chiesa was 10 million, 12 million if you include the add-ons. It's buttons, isn't it, by a modern club's revenue. So they've gone 2 years there without putting their hand in the pocket. So that money that has essentially been stored up for transfers and hasn't been used, the Caicedo money, all that sort of stuff, it's still there. Not necessarily just sitting there in the bank, but if the club feel that they want to go and massively invest, and you look at the spending spree of 2018 when it was Fabinho, Alisson, Van Dijk, Naby Keita, Shaqiri, that pretty much set them up for 3 or 4 or 5 years, didn't it? And then you just sort of add to that as you go, So I think maybe this is the summer where Liverpool are looking to do likewise, and then for the coming 2-3 summers after it, you're not really adding to it that much because you've already rebuilt the squad. So that could be the way they're approaching this, whereas spend an incredible amount, historic amount for the club this summer, and then the next 2-3 summers you're not having to do much. So that could be the way they're thinking of this, and I wouldn't totally rule out at least a play for Alexander Isak this summer if they do feel that they can get incomings in from the likes of Darwin Núñez and maybe anyone else who moves on.
Yeah, I think that's where Liverpool differ from other clubs, because you look at like other clubs, like say Chelsea for example, like they'll just go and buy a load and just hope and just throw loads of money at it and see what happens. Where Liverpool have got to be more selective, because we've had to have been over the years. Like we can't afford to buy someone shit essentially and then try and move them on, because it just doesn't work.
You look at the amount of failures Liverpool have had in the transfer window, say the last 6 or 7 years. Who would you say? Naby Keita, that comes with the caveat of him having won everything as a Liverpool player, but didn't quite live up to the hype, did it? He eventually leaves on a free, and Liverpool just sort of have to absorb that loss. But they can't do that in the same way Chelsea can, like you say. Chelsea signed Lukaku 3-4 years ago for nearly 100 million. Within 6 to 8 months, he was out the team, and they were looking for loans for him left and right, and then
it's like a different world, isn't it?
He just quietly goes away, and no one ever speaks of it again.
Yeah.
If Liverpool bought someone for nearly 100 million and it turned out to be an absolute disaster, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. They'd have to try and make it work, and I think that's the difference. So we'll see, but I do think that maybe this is the summer where Liverpool are going big as the revenues will allow them to, and then the next few years we might see a sort of more conservative approach, and then just sort of adding to what the squad needs that summer, as opposed to rebuilding and it's being massively exciting. Because let's face it, if you're successful, you don't need to rebuild every summer, do you?
That's amazing, because if we do what we've done, say we've got Frimpong, we've got Vert, we Kerkez over the line, then we signed Isak, it's like you've solved all your problem areas there. See, the next couple of transfer windows, you don't really have to do much. You just have to supplement people that want to leave. You bring someone else in. You put Ingamoa, maybe you put him in to start. You start bringing him into the first 11 now and again to get him some more experience. But you don't have to go too crazy with it. I think that's the point. Like,
especially the ages as well. Like Vert's 22, Frimpong 24, Kerkez 21. Isak who's 25 at the moment, isn't he? So I think they are buying for the now and buying for the long term as well. Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting. I mean, we could be here all day talking about that. But we have got an opening question. We've got a bit of a finishing question just for a bit of fun. But this is from Doug, I think this was. But we've got to pick your five-a-side, but journos only. Journos only?
I don't know how many journos you've seen play footy, but...
Yeah. So five-a-side. So am I playing in there?
I mean, if you want, like.
Yeah. Go on. I'll dust off my samples. I'll have a go. Although he's not technically a journalist anymore, I had Neil Jones in there with me.
Good guy.
I gave him the captain's armband.
He's a good player as well.
Good player. Yeah. Good player. Although he's in his 40s now, so maybe he wasn't not quite what he was 5 6 years ago.
Control on the back. Be sound.
I feel like I'd have to have the Bath Bull leading the line though, James Pearce. He's a little bit of a goal hound.
I've never seen him. Is he any good?
He's a little bit of a target man. He'll always get a goal. Echo FC will get beat 6-1 and he'll get the one.
Get it.
Yeah.
And he'll be saying, at least a score.
Yeah, he'll be wheeling away at 6-0 like he's Alan Shearer. Yeah. So what's that? 3 players, 2 more. Can I have Sam Carroll? Used to work for the Echo.
Good player.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah. I'd have Sam used to play in goal for Everton, but I wouldn't have him in goal because it feels like that's a waste of his talent outfield.
Really?
So I'd have him in there. And then the goalkeeper's always been a bit of a struggle. So Guy Clark, who used to work for Blood Red, who now works for the Athletic. I'd have him as our goalkeeper because there are not many goals. I think goalkeeper's always been a problem position for Echo FC. So certainly since he went to the Athletic, we haven't had one. So I'd have him. So there's me 5: Guy Clark, Sam Carroll, Neil Jones, me, James Pearce.
Boss. But we'll leave it there. Nice one to Paul for jumping on. It's been an absolute pleasure. But that has been episode 25 of Paul and a Pint in Shenanigans. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks for watching or listening. Thanks to Paul for jumping on, and we'll be back on the next one. Ta-da.